Welcome back to another UNC basketball podcast here on TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you're checking us out on our fast-growing YouTube channel that is called Tar Heel Illustrated, I am THI publisher Andrew Jones. And joining me is our jack of all trades. She's our director of football recruiting, but also our top assistant on staff. She's been involved in all the basketball coverage, all the Zooms, everything, covering the Wake Forest game, and a former college basketball player herself at Wingate University, Miss Deana King, and our very own Brandon Peay joined the staff back in August. Brandon's been knee-deep in the coverage of football and in basketball, been a bunch of games, been to practice, been all over it. And Brandon, of course, is a former 3-year starter high school athlete, so he knows what this stuff is all about. He's been in a three-point stance before, and he's boxed a guy out before in his life, so that's always a good thing. So, Brandon, it's good to have you on with your first podcast here on THI.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. Okay, guys, let's jump into it. Tar Heels have what I think is an enormous game Saturday night at Wake Forest. To this day, I think it's their biggest game of the year. One might even say this is a fork in the road game. And one of the things that makes it a fork in the road game is a piece that we posted Friday morning about where the Tar Heels are with respect to their NCAA tournament resume. And right now, it's a bad resume. They're 12-5. Their NET ranking is 44, which is on the fence territory. And the thing that really hurts them is the fact that they have no Q1 wins and one Q2 win. In the ACC, Georgia Tech has no Q1 or Q2 wins. Pitt and Boston College have no Q1 win, and each of them have a Q2 win, just like Carolina. And then outside of that, Tar Heels got nothing. This is one of 4 remaining Q1 games on their schedule. 2 of them are against Duke. The other one is at Virginia Tech. If North Carolina wants to get into the NCAA tournament, it's going to have to get a Q1 win. It's going to have to get several more Q2 wins at least. So this is a big game because of NCAA stuff, but I don't think they're worrying about that right now, guys. They're coming off a tail kicking in Coral Gables. What I witnessed down there was terrible body language. I thought the body language in Las Vegas was bad, but it was worse Tuesday night in Coral Gables. Hubert had no answers after the game. He didn't really have a lot of answers during the game because it took him a long time before any adjustments or any attempted an adjustment was made. And based on what he told us, the adjustment was covering full court late in the first half, which obviously it didn't work. Nothing he tried worked. And he even was asked after the game, and I thought this was rather poignant, would Anthony Harris have helped? He was asked about Anthony Harris, who is one of their better on-ball defenders and energy guy, and he said it wouldn't have made a difference. So that tells me he just didn't think his team was locked in. It was pretty obvious from what we saw they weren't locked in. They better be Wednesday or Saturday night because I think Wake Forest has more weapons than Miami. I think the environment will be more difficult for Carolina. And it's not like this team has won a big road game in a long time. So this isn't a huge test for the Tar Heels. Deana, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on where they are in between the blowout at Miami and going into a difficult task at Wake Forest?
Well, I'll go back to Georgia Tech where they look just awesome. I mean, everything went right, and then everything that went right against Georgia Tech went sour at Miami. And me and you have talked about adjustments. Somebody that's watched Carolina basketball for years with Coach Smith and Coach Williams, they've been playing a lot of man-to-man, and, Hubert always says stuff about, tweaking and switching up and doing little things on defense, but I don't believe they've done the point zone that Coach Smith really loved. I mean, I know a lot of people don't like the zones and everything, but heck, try something different. That they've got the kids that can move now. Now, when you're playing 2 bigs, it's kind of hard to possibly do that and everything. But with the athletic guys they got on the court, they should be able to cover and make up and stuff. So, yeah, I agree with you about Wake Forest. It's a huge game. They've not played all that well in Winston-Salem here lately. So I expect I don't really know what to expect. I mean, they may come out and do really well, and then they may come out and stink up the joint. So it's just going to be interesting to see.
Deana, your point about the zone, when I'm sitting at the Mohegan Sun watching Tennessee do what Tennessee was doing, and then more so in Vegas watching what Kentucky did, and then watching what Miami did, all I could, even Notre Dame, we'll get to that in a second, all I could think about was 1-3-1 zone. Because the zone is supposed to stay, they're supposed to drive against the zone. I mean, I remember that back in high school. And we're taught, what we're going up against Archbishop Carroll or something like that, a really athletic team that can drive, or McNamara. And our coach was like, we're going to play a tight zone. We don't want them driving. They got to beat us from the outside. Now that was around the transition in the 3-point era. But I think you can defend the 3 with the 1-3-1 zone as well, especially given the fact the threes are coming from wing to wing. Threes were, I think Miami attempted 1-3 from the corner. So the threes are coming from wing to wing because they're coming off of penetration. And because of penetration and the pick and pops and stuff like that. And the pick and pops happen between the wings. They don't happen on the baseline. So 1-3-1 to me makes an awful lot of sense. Brandon, what are your thoughts on this? What do you think about where they are right now between the blowout at Miami and whatever is going to happen in a tough place to go at Joel Coliseum? Because I'm told they're expecting a sellout and a lot of Wake fans, because a lot of times in the past there were a lot of Carolina fans, but I'm hearing there's going to be a lot of Wake fans and not as much Carolina blue in the building as in the past.
Yeah, so before I get started, I want everyone to know that this isn't like a let's bash on Hubert Davis podcast. That's not why we're here. Yeah. But I think it's obvious to anyone who follows North Carolina basketball that the team just doesn't play with energy and effort on a consistent basis. And to be 100% transparent, and before I say this, I want to say I think here at THI, I think we've done a very good job of warning fans, like, there's going to be some growing pains. Everything's not going to be – the new car smell will wear off. I think we did a very good job at preparing our subscribers for that. But to be 100% transparent, when you look at the energy and effort, I think you have to look at the coaches. One thing Mac Brown says that, like, always sticks with me is whatever product is presented to the public, whatever's out there, it's either coached to happen or it's being allowed to happen. And, we went to the practice, so we've seen how intense Hubert Davis can get about his teams playing with energy and effort. Like, we saw behind the scenes, and we've been to numerous press conferences where he's constantly preaching energy, effort. So we know that he's not coaching it to happen. But when you have a game and you have players who aren't, sometimes we're human. Sometimes they come out, they don't have the energy, they don't have the effort, they're not executing your game plan, and you don't make any personnel adjustments, essentially you're allowing it to happen. So I think going into Wake Forest, it's important for Hubert to have a real pulse on the team to see where the energy and effort level is and not hesitate to make personnel adjustments. I know we don't want to do the whole Roy Williams and Hubert Davis comparison, but when the team didn't come out with energy and effort with Roy Williams, he would point to the end of the bench, 5 guys would stand up, they would come in, maybe play 2 or 3 game minutes, and then come back out, and usually the starters will have better energy. I'm not saying he has to do something like that, but actually Hubert Davis could do something like that and actually put 5 pretty good players in the game. He could, like, if you look down to the people who aren't in the rotation, he can put 5 scholarship players in the game just to change it up or something. But I just think he has to learn he has to make adjustments on the fly, and you can't just sit in it. When you're getting beat, you just can't sit in it and hope that your game plan starts working.
One of the things that we all need to remember, and this is not making an excuse for Hubert at all. He's only been a head coach for 17 games, plus an exhibition game, plus a secret scrimmage. And he spent the first 50 years of his life not doing that. JV doesn't count. Yeah. He talked to guys in the huddle, but he's communicating to a different mindset. He's communicating to guys who are on a different basketball mission, communicating to guys that are not playing for the same standard that obviously the regular Tar Heels are. Maybe that's a little bit of experience that helps, but it's really not going to translate into what he's doing right now. So there are going to be growing pains with anybody. When I started this job, I'd been in this profession for a long time, but I had to learn how to do things in this realm. Even though I had left newspapers in 2008 when I left the Wilmington Star News and I went to Buster Sports, a national startup, that I was on regional national at Fox Sports, I had to learn how to do those things pertaining to that standard, to that audience. And then my audience changed when I came here, and it took me a while. and I had already been pretty seasoned and had a lot of success. So, and I'm using it as an example because I think we all understand that Hubert's going to have a grace period. He still gets a grace period. The one criticism, though, that I think is valid is that what Deana brought up. It doesn't take 20 years of being a head coach to know that, we got to flash a zone here for a couple possessions. Let's flash a trap. Let's change it up just to throw them off. Because if you read Dean Smith's book about coaching defense, he said that they would change defenses sometimes, just flash some stuff just for the sake of flashing it. Don't ever let them get comfortable with what you're doing and where it becomes almost, and I've termed this a couple of times, more like the other team's running dummy offense because they know everything you're going to do. Notre Dame ran what appeared to be dummy offense. And Miami the other night, I said in the Three Things podcast afterward that a couple of dribbles before a shot was taken, I knew where the shot was going to come from. Just sitting there in my spot on the media area watching the game because it was so predictable. That's when you have to change stuff up just to knock them off a little bit. And sometimes you get a couple of turnovers, you get a couple of stops, you get a few buckets, and then the game. I've seen that happen. I've covered North Carolina and Duke for years, okay? And in the last 8 years, just North Carolina. And when they're playing another team, whether it's on the road or at home, the other team's in a groove, they get a couple stops, they get a couple buckets, you could see the other teams tighten up. That's when those words in the front of the jersey suddenly really start to matter and get into other teams' heads. I haven't seen that happen once this year because when they've fallen behind, they haven't really gripped. The only time they responded to a run was Georgia Tech's 19-2 run in Atlanta in early December. And that was because they just came down the court and hit a bunch of threes. They weren't really carving up Carolina. They were just hitting threes. They hit like 5 of them in about 4 minutes. So that's what that was. And you're not going to hit threes all night long. Then they stopped hitting those threes, and Carolina handled it pretty nicely. They didn't actually react the wrong way like they did at Notre Dame, like they did against Kentucky, and like they did the night against Miami. So, but we do have to have some grace here for Hubert because it's going to take time for him to learn how to push buttons, learn how to read kids. But it shouldn't take a lot of time to know that, hey, I'm going to throw a 1-3-1 for a couple possessions. I'm going to throw the run and jump out there. I'm going to put a few guys out there. There's 9:41 left in the half. You got the under 8 minute timeout coming. I'm going to put Styles and Dunn and Puff in there. Just give a different look. Let the starters sit on the bench, just watch. And then they get the extended break through the TV timeout. We haven't seen him do that yet. Perhaps we will see him do it moving forward. Either one of you go ahead and take it.
Yeah, the Carolina basketball, Dean did it with the blue team. Roy's done it. We've seen Roy do it a lot. It does something. I've seen Roy do it and take all the starters out, and they come and the subs, reserves gives everybody a boost, even the crowd, or just play even, with the other team. So I just think, he's on the job learning, as you said, nobody expected that he's going to go undefeated as head coach. There's going to be some bumps, there's going to be some highs and valleys, but I just don't think a lot of people realize how kind of drastic, I pointed it out early, looking like $1 million against Georgia Tech. And then, really, I don't even know how to explain the performance at Miami, but give credit to Miami. They did what they had to do. They made a point to stop and limit Armando. I believe the first 4 possessions down the court, he didn't even touch the ball in scoring position, and Carolina shot like 4 3-pointers and everything. So the key at Wake Forest, I believe is going inside with Armando. I know Wake Forest is going to try to stop that and everything, but he's going to have some help. They're going to have to hit some shots. RJ looks like he is kind of playing a little bit better, his shot and everything, but Caleb Love is, he's the guy that's got the keys. And so if he plays well, usually UNC does. So UNC's got to have a good game out of Caleb. And Garcia, since he's been back, he's not I don't think he's been playing like he did before the concussion and everything. So hoping that Dawson gets back on track too.
Brandon, when I was putting together my 5 keys for the game, I went back and looked at RJ and Caleb in the games that Carolina has, in 4 of their losses, not the Purdue game, and the ones where the team just didn't look right. And Notre Dame's one of those games, and Caleb even admitted that they took Notre Dame lightly. So that explains sort of the way they played that night outside of Armando. But RJ and Caleb, in the other 4 losses outside of Purdue, they're shooting 28% from the floor, 32% from 3, and they have 18 assists and 24 turnovers. If you look at the other 13 games, they're shooting about 48.5% from the field. They're shooting 46% from 3, and their combined assist to turnover ratio is about 7.5 assists to 4.2 turnovers. Significantly different numbers. Would you agree that it's not how Armando goes, because Armando was really good at Notre Dame and really good against Kentucky? It's how RJ and Caleb, or at least one of them, go. If one of them plays well, Carolina has a chance to win. If neither one of them plays well, they stand no chance at winning.
Absolutely. Like Deana just said, Carolina will go as far as Caleb, and to some extent RJ will take them. And my biggest concern with this team is whenever those two specifically have been matched up against a backcourt that is considered a high level Division I backcourt, I think it's pretty safe to say they've lost all of those matchups. This is just off the top of my head, so I could be wrong, but I'm thinking
older guys too. Well, there's older guys at Notre Dame. There's older guys at Kentucky. Yeah. There's older guys at Miami. Some older guys at Tennessee.
Yeah.
Although Kennedy Chandler's not old, he had a pretty good game.
Yeah. And what's the guy from Wake Forest named Wesley? I'm pretty sure he's a freshman. He had a pretty good game against him. But that's Notre
Dame. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my biggest concern with this team is the fact that in order to do anything in a tournament, in order to make a tournament, you have to have good guard play. And as the season goes on, the guards that they go against is going to get better and better and better. And I'm concerned that they're going to not be able to step up and meet that challenge. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how many rebounds Armando pulls down, how many points he scores. If the point guards can't win if the backcourt can't win their matchup, then nothing can happen in the front court, essentially.
Yeah, I agree. And Armando didn't get his first basket until 7:34 left in the half the other night. He had 3 points at halftime. They were down by 27. So the guards weren't playing well, and they weren't getting the ball to Armando. That's how you get a lead to mushroom like that. Brandon, we'll start with you looking at Wake Forest. Wake's got a lot of guys who can play. People need to change their perception about Wake Forest basketball. The Jeff Bezdelic and Danny Manning eras are gone. And what they have now is they brought in some kids that have helped. Alondas Williams, Brady Manick, maybe we can give a scouting report on him. They were teammates last year at Oklahoma. The kid, LaRavia, the kid from Indiana State's a nice player. He's a 6'8", 6'9" kid who could shoot. He's got a nice mid-range game, a nice baseline game. He can shoot from the perimeter. Mucius and some of those other guys, they have dudes that can shoot the 3. And they will shoot a lot of 3s, but they also have the ability to drive. Williams is Isaiah Wong is an issue, but Williams might be more athletic than Isaiah Wong. So if you're looking at this game from the perspective of the Tar Heels, what do you have to do to stop Wake Forest? Do you throw everything at trying to slow Alondas Williams down, or do you say, okay, I'm not going to let LaRavia or one of these other guys go off on us?
Well, I think the first key for them to be successful in Winston-Salem is they have to be able to respond to adversity. Anytime you play any sporting event, you're going to have adversity along the way. But the difference is when you're on the road and that crowd gets a little rocky, you can't go into a shell and hide. I think that's a bigger key than anything physical. I think they have to come out mentally prepared to deal with a big crowd that's going to be ready. It's going to be their Super Bowl, essentially, because, like you said, we can't think of Wake Forest in the past, but I guarantee you the people who cheer for Wake Forest will only see Carolina, and they don't care what the state of Carolina is. If they get a win, they get a win. So I think that place is going to be rocking, and I think Carolina has to be mentally tough enough to go in there, execute their game plan, and get the job done.
And I think it helps Wake that they've already played the Duke game at home.
Yeah.
So the kind of do we belong? Are we for real stuff? They've already been through that now. And I don't think that Carolina is the barometer test that Duke is right now, because Carolina is not nearly as good as Duke. So they've kind of been through that, and they saw where some of the things that went wrong against Duke that are correctable for Wake, that maybe if Wake plays Duke now, they have a better chance of beating Duke. So I agree that I think Wake is going to be a better team in this game than it was against Duke, just simply because it's gone through that. Deana, what do you think Carolina has to deal with the most? Is it dealing with Alondas Williams, or is it the other guys? Because let's remember, Notre Dame, 6th leading scorer, Nate Laszewski, goes 6 for 7 from 3 and scores 20 points, right? Sam Wardenberg goes for he was 1 point off a career high in the first half. He had 2 driving dunks and then a bunch of threes. He scores 21 points. So Carolina has shown here recently that they can maybe slow down a leading scorer, but other guys can go off. So what do you think the big concern is here?
They just need a total defensive effort. I know Leaky will probably have the assignment of being on Alondas. I mean, he's a 20-point scorer. Leaky has the ability to guard him, but like you said, it seems like somebody else pops up and has a career night against UNC, and sometimes it's a kid that maybe UNC didn't recruit, and they have the all-world game against a kid like Davion Williamson, who I saw. He's a local kid from Winston-Salem who went to East Tennessee State, and he came with Coach Forbes when Forbes left East Tennessee State. I can see Williamson having a big night against Carolina. He's a very talented kid, great shooter. So, but they got to just. I don't know if they totally lose focus or something, and want to stop the guy on each team and lose focus, and let these other guys go off on them. So I just like to see them play with some intensity and some desire. I mean, we've read message boards, the fans and everything. Coach Davis shouldn't have to coach effort. I mean, and Brandon, we're all former athletes. I'll be honest, I didn't like to practice, but I love game day. It was when it was game day, I couldn't wait. It was time to get out and just showtime, and I'd never had any problem about getting up for a game. I didn't care if we played the bottom team or the top team. It was the same. And I know everybody's different, but this is a huge game for them. And I agree with Andrew. It could be a turning point of the season if they come out and don't do good. I just think it's not going to be it's going to be a tough next few weeks for Carolina fans.
I do think that you can coach effort, though, because I think that stems from the culture of the program. When was the last time you saw Villanova not show up? When was the last time you saw Tom Izzo's team not show up? And I know people don't want to hear this, but what about the guy down the road? There are certain programs that show up all the time. I think Roy's teams usually did. But everyone's going to have a bad game. Everyone's going to have a game where it's a step slow, because it's like Brandon was right saying earlier, it's human nature. Brandon Peay is not sensational at his job every day. Some days he's just got to kind of grind through and get through. Same with Deana King, same with Andrew Jones, same with everybody, whether you're the president of the United States, CEO of Exxon, or the head basketball coach at North Carolina, or a player at North Carolina. That's human nature. And one of the things that I have tried in my career to explain to people, especially the older I've gotten, the closer I've gotten to programs and seeing the inner workings. And as I've told you guys, there is no more human experience in this business than to walk into a locker room 15 minutes after a team gets eliminated from the NCAA tournament, especially when they had aspirations of going much further than they did, or if it's in the Final Four or even the national championship game 15 minutes after Chris Jenkins hits a 30-foot shot to beat them. That's a real moment. That's where you see that the fans from a distance see them wearing this uniform, and they almost see them as human cartoon characters that are there to fulfill their own personal needs, when all they are is regular dudes who have regular life issues that they take with them to the court sometimes, or they have to learn when they mature to deflect that stuff and not allow it to get to the court. Nevertheless, they are human. So my point is that I do think culture in a program has a lot to do with guys being ready to play all the time. When a guy says that we didn't take Notre Dame all that seriously because they lost to Boston College without realizing that they also beat the team that just kicked your butt a week ago, that's an issue that needs to be fixed. I do think over time Hubert will get a hold on that. But I do think that the effort thing is something that perplexes a lot of people. I think it's a little bit explainable through the fact that humans are humans. They're going to do human things. But I also think it's something that the staff needs to figure out the buttons to push. Now, with that in mind, I want to gear toward the NCAA tournament here and what the Tar Heels need to do, because what we've seen through 17 games is a team that 4 times just wasn't there, essentially. They can't afford to do that anymore. Whatever the issue is in allowing that to happen, it must end, because they have limited opportunities moving forward to accumulate on their resume enough to actually get into the NCAA tournament. I'm going to go long-winded here, but there's a reason why. Here's the scenario. They're 12-5 right now, and they're 4-2 in the ACC. In any other year, nobody would be worried about that being on the path toward not getting into the tournament. But the ACC is terrible this year. It's the Atlantic 10. So if you put St. Bonaventure on Carolina's jersey instead of North Carolina, how would you view their resume? And if they continue on this track and let's say end up 14-6, which means that they would go 10-4 remainder of the ACC regular season, that will put them at 22-9. And they lose in the first round of the ACC tournament. They're 22-10. But where do those wins come from? They have 4 Q1 opportunities left. I think they have 6 Q2 opportunities left, and that includes like a game at Louisville who's falling apart because they're 109 in the NET, but that qualifies as a Q2 game because it's on the road. Where do these wins come from? How many of these wins do they need to get in order to impress the NCAA tournament committee to the point where they're included? Because I'm telling you right now, at 22-10 with maybe no Q1 wins and 4 Q2 wins, that's going to look like St. Bonaventure does on Selection Sunday. That's going to look like Colorado State does on Selection Sunday, or Bowling Green, teams like that. And the committee will get a lot of heat if they put in North Carolina with no signature wins. And when they have played Q1 teams, they've gotten their rear ends handed to them. So project forward about what you guys think the Tar Heels need to do to get to the NCAA tournament. And that brings us back to Saturday, why Saturday night is so important, because that's a Q1 opportunity. And I think it's a winnable game if the Tar Heels are dialed in.
Yeah. So as far as the NCAA tournament is concerned, you said they have 4 more Q1 games. In my opinion,
Q1 games at this time, that can change. Like let's say they beat Wake, but then Wake goes into a tailspin and ends up a Q2 game. I think it'll be Q1 for a while. The only 2 locks for Q1 games they have left are the 2 games against Duke. The other one is at Virginia Tech, who, by the way, at the time that we're recording this, is the 2nd highest rated ACC team in the NET at number 41. That shows you how down the league is. But go ahead, Brandon.
So I would say, okay, so after you explain that, I would say bare minimum, they need to split with Duke. They need to get the one at home and then the one on the road. If they get it, it's icing on the cake. Wake Forest on Saturday is an extremely important game. Like, if they lose this game, not only will the fan base lose confidence, I'm concerned that the team might lose confidence, and that might be the snowflake that sends the snowball down the hill per se. So I think the game on Saturday, I don't like using must win in January, but in my opinion, the game on Saturday is a must win because this team needs confidence and this team needs to know that they can beat a quality opponent, because you said earlier that it's been 4 times that they haven't showed up, but I would argue that we could go back to the beginning of the season where I believe me and you, we were at the Brown game. I can make an argument that they didn't show up for that game either because – you know, I mean, they won the game. They won the game, but I believe Brown ended up scoring 80 points against them. And then for most of the game, it was a layup drill. But
it was a 5-point game.
Huh?
It was a 5-point game.
Yeah. So eventually the talent took over, but we could argue that they didn't show up for that game either. So I think the most
I agree
important
with
thing
you. I agree with you, but it didn't hurt. But ultimately, it didn't hurt. Now, those were signs that they weren't dynamic for 40 minutes. All those games, because the only non-conference, the only Patsy they beat by 20 points, I believe, was App State in their final game against Patsy's, and they beat them by 20 points. So they could go look at where Loyola is, guys. Loyola is like 269 in the RPI or in the NET, and Carolina didn't exactly wax them. Brown is in the late 100s, near 200. College of Charleston had an 11-point lead on them. College of Charleston's 157. Now, Carolina needs College of Charleston to win games, because if that moves into the top, if College of Charleston is ranked in the top 135 on Selection Sunday, that becomes a Q2 road win, which will help Carolina. They need Furman, which is a pretty nice club. They're 12-7. They need them to win a crap load of games in the Southern Conference, so that stays as a Q2 win. That'll never climb to a Q1 win, but it could stay as a Q2 win, or it could climb to one. It's not a Q2 win yet. It could climb to one. They need things like that to happen. They need Michigan to win games. They need Kentucky to not fall apart, Tennessee to not fall apart, and the two big non-conference losses there in which they were blown out, because you can't afford to suddenly have a 28-9-point loss to a Q2 team on your resume. So they need help. But as far as taking care of business themselves, Deana, it begins in Winston-Salem. And if Wake Forest can hold the rest of the way and stay as a Q1 team, then that's going to help them a lot. And I agree with you, Brandon. If they can beat Duke and get one of these other Q1s, if they have 2 Q1s and 5 Q2s and they're at 22 wins, they're going to get in the field. If they don't have those things, it's going to be a challenge.
Well, if they can go to Winston and get a win, that gives them a little confidence heading into the next week, where they have 3 home games and they're in the Smith Center against Virginia Tech, which could be another big game for them. Boston College, and then the big game against NC State on the weekend. So I like what Brandon said about the confidence factor. If they can come out and get this win at Winston, I think they have a good chance of getting rolling pretty good heading into that Duke game a little bit later.
Let me read what they have left. As of right now, here are their remaining games based on the quadrant rankings. The Q1 games are at Wake, Duke, at Virginia Tech, and at Duke. So only one of them is going to be at home. And Duke will stay a Q1 game no matter what. The Q2 games remaining are Virginia Tech at home, at Louisville, at Clemson, FSU at home, and at NC State as of now. But the Wolfpack is number 121. If they fall out of the top 135, that becomes a Q3 game. The Q3 games they have remaining as of right now, all home against NC State, Louisville, and Syracuse. And I would not be surprised to see Louisville just plummet and plummet and plummet. There are a lot of issues there. They have 2 Q4 games remaining. This is the ACC, and they're playing Q4 games. That's BC and Pitt at home. And let's be honest, if both those games were on the road, they'd still be Q4 games, because those teams are atrocious. So, but crazily, Pitt has 2 ACC wins, and BC came back from 23 behind to win at Clemson last week. There's a lot of bad teams, a lot of bad stuff going on in this league. So that's what they have left. So there aren't a lot of opportunities to secure something that can help them moving forward. And a lot of people think, it's just past the middle of January. It's too early to talk about the NCAA tournament. In a typical ACC, yeah, I agree. You could play your way into the tournament in the league. In this year's ACC, you could play your way out of the tournament because there's so much mediocrity in the conference. So let's project real fast, Brandon. They've got, 14 conference games left. I just read off what it is. How do you think they go in these final 14, and will they do enough to get into the field?
I'll say these last 14 games, their record will be 11-3. I think they do split with Duke, and I think ultimately the name Carolina does get them over the edge to get them into the tournament. But
I've been told for years by people who've been on the committee that they don't actually look at the name of the team. They look at formerly the RPI rank and now the NET. So they don't want to be swayed by that. But I'm with you. They know that North Carolina generates eyeballs and gets people in the building. And I think North Carolina will almost always get the edge. But this year, with the ACC being so bad, the Carolina having embarrassing losses on their resume, and the fact that the committee might just get all kinds of heat if they're on the fence and they get in over a Wyoming or something like that, I think they would take a lot of heat. It might be tougher this year to take them because they're named than in previous years. Deana, what do you think? What do you project?
It's kind of an odd situation that most Carolina fans are not used to being in with the talk and like you said, with the ACC being down in compared to years past. I mean, it's going to be tough. And but like you did say, I mean, Carolina is an eyeball team, a blue blood that maybe at the end of the day will get the benefit of the doubt. As far as the 14 games, I kind of agree with Brandon about the Duke. I think Carolina can. Well, Caleb Love had two of his best games last year against Duke. I mean, a lot of people may be thinking that he's going to be able to do something similar. It's going to be very tough for Carolina to beat Duke in Durham, which would be Coach K's final game at Cameron. You can imagine the hoopla, but who knows? I mean, anything's possible. We've seen this team go really up and then really down. So 11-3 is reasonable to me. But as most coaches will always say, coach speak, they're only concerned about Saturday night.
Exactly. Well, I think one positive thing for Carolina fans, a big positive, is the fact that once they play this game in Winston-Salem, that will be their 7th ACC game, and the first 5 of them will have been on the road. So they only have 5 more road games left. And you're talking at Louisville, at State, at Duke, at Clemson, at Virginia Tech. The rest are at home. This has been a different team at home. You know, I know Michigan's struggling a little bit, but, you know, that was their largest margin of victory until they went to Chestnut Hill. So this is a little bit of a different team at home, at least shown to be so far. So after Saturday night, they have, 13 more games left, and 8 of them are at home. So I think that will help this team. 11-3 is pretty optimistic if you're looking at things in terms of optimism. I'm going to go 10-4 because I think this team has kind of shown us so far who they are, and they're going to lose a game in there somewhere that's going to have people scratching their heads. They're going to get blown out by somebody, and they're going to look really good at times. I agree with you guys too. I think they will split with Duke. I think they beat Duke at home in a thrilling game, and probably go to Durham and get pounded because of the environment there and everything else. Although I've seen teams in emotional games struggle because there's so much more on their mind going in than just the task at hand, and they kind of have a difficult time. They get off the difficult starts, and they never really get their traction. That's why teams lose on senior night a lot, especially if they have a lot of seniors, a lot of emotional things going on. That does happen a lot. So I could see something interesting happening there, but we have to wait. That's 6 weeks away.
It's just a lot. It'd be a lot of pressure. That team.
It'd be a lot of pressure. But it also could be a lot of. But what if Carolina's in a situation where it's a must-win game, no matter who they're playing, and they got to go into that hornet's nest and deal with it? And those kids didn't have to deal with that place last year. The only guys on this team that have ever had to deal with NC State on the road and Duke on the road are Armando and Leakey.
Yeah.
The only scholarship guys. And I know Manick's played really well in Allen Fieldhouse. So that's obviously as good of an environment as there is, but it's not the same kind of hatred that you're going to get over in Raleigh, and certainly Raleigh more so than Durham. Raleigh's just a story unto itself. So that's always a fun place when Carolina goes there. So guys, right now, let me ask you one last question here. We're just kind of flying by the seat of our pants as we close this thing out. I know this might be unfair. You don't have to answer the question. What grade would you give this team? Not the staff, not the players, but North Carolina basketball, 17 games into the season. If you're the teacher and you have to hand out a letter grade and write it in red ink and circle it and pass it out in front of the class, what kind of grade would North Carolina be looking at when you hand them the grade on this test right now?
I think if you look at it as a overall, I think you would have to give them a C, because you have to take their good performances against Georgia Tech and Boston College and Michigan. You have to take those good performances, and you have to weigh them against Kentucky and all the bad games that they've had. So I think when you balance it all out, I think it all comes back to the middle as a C. The good and the bad, good of the offense, the bad of the defense it all averages out, in my opinion.
Deana?
C plus with the ability to raise the grade, get some extra credit. They beat Wake Forest. They go on a 3-game winning streak next week. It could creep up to a B minus. Depends on effort. If they come in Wake Forest and get a double-digit win, that's huge to me. But like Brandon said, they're kind of inconsistent. So you got to basically say average. They've not really did anything spectacular to be a B or an A. I mean, if they'd came in and had wins against Kentucky, after the Purdue game, I would have probably been in the B range. But, since that Purdue game, they've been really inconsistent, so C plus for me right now.
Okay, so the extra credit, does that mean the Tar Heels get to go show up after school to the teacher's classroom and they could practice staying in front of the ball? They could practice help side defense and communication and, not switching, getting around screens, fighting through screens, and the pick and pop, staying on the big so he's not wide open with nobody with. I mean, we've had photos either from our staff shooting photos or on USA Today where guys are driving and they're in the lane and the only Carolina player that's in the picture has his back to him. Or they're wide open shooting just right at the 3-point line from the wing or something like that. And there's like a Carolina arm and the ball's over here and it's a wide open shot. So if they show up after school, they're not going to touch the ball. It's going to be everything that they do when the other guys are touching the ball, right?
Right.
Well,
it's like what it is. It's like if you're really strong in the spelling and the definition of big words and stuff, but you don't know how to use them in a sentence very well. They go after school and they're going to learn how to write a sentence using that word, those spelling words, those vocab words in a sentence. So that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So the teacher's going to have to get a lot of overtime pay because this is a pretty big job because these guys have not consistently been any good on defense. They've been really good at times, but when they're really good, it's usually against clubs that are kind of like if you stop DeVoe, Usher's an okay player, but it's, Virginia is offensively a mess. Boston College is a mess. So the challenge is to do it when there's multiple guys who can score, which brings us back to Saturday night against Wake Forest. Wake Forest has 4 guys averaging in double figures, another guy at 8.5 points. They have confident players. They have a coach who plays guys confidently. He puts them in situations where they can play to their strengths. They're not as talented as North Carolina, but right now I think they've been a better team than North Carolina. So let's get some predictions. I know we do our staff picks and everything else, guys. But let's go ahead and throw it out there in a quick snapshot. Brandon Peay, what's going to happen Saturday night?
All right, well, if you're asking me for my prediction, I cannot predict North Carolina to win a Q1 road game until I actually see them do it. So I'm going to say Carolina loses 82-77 to Wake Forest on Saturday.
Okay, did you send in your staff picks yet? Because I don't think I've seen the email.
I was actually going to ask you about that. I never got an email about we'll talk about that later. I got you.
Okay, well, but anyway, send me your staff picks as soon as we stop recording this so I can stick it in there. 82-77. Deana, you're not doing staff picks for basketball anymore, so this is all fresh, and this is a fresh Miss King take here. What's your prediction?
I know. I got to where I don't like doing these because I've been
I don't like being wrong because people get on me. That's what she says, Brandon.
Well, people call the staff homers and stuff. And I try to look at things, through my basketball mind and everything, but I think it's going to be a close game. And it just depends on, Carolina can come out and play defense, and I think Armando will have a big night again. I'm gonna pick Carolina by 3. I think it can go either way. If Williams is on, it could be a big night for Wake Forest. But I think I have confidence in Leakey to kind of keep him in control, and we'll just see what happens.
I think Armando's going to post numbers. I think he's going to do that pretty much against everybody. Caleb or RJ, one of them has to have a good game. I'm talking like 18, being a positive with the assist to turnover. And this team has got to stop turning the ball over in positions that the other teams could score quickly. They're giving up a ton of points off of their turnovers, like 21.8 points off 13.2 turnovers in their 5 losses. And that's got to change. And that's RJ and Caleb more than anybody else. I also think this is a game for Manic to step up and hit some shots and get some weak side buckets cutting. If they're going to double Armando a lot, Manic's got to cut to the basket on the weak side, and Armando will find him. He's been a much better passer this year. All that said, like Brandon said, until this team proves it can win a road game against a Q1 type team, it's really hard for me to pick that. Would I be surprised if the Tar Heels rise to the challenge and pick up a big win and change the narrative of what we're all talking about? No, I would not be surprised, because I do think that's in this group. But I'm not going to predict it to happen until I see it happen against a really good team. And so I don't remember what my pick is on our staff picks that already done. I think it's like 82, 72, something like that. I think it'll be a game that they're in sequences where if they change course a little bit, they could be in position to win. But I just think that someone like LaRavia or Musha, some of those guys is going to have a really big game, and that's going to be too much to overcome. So 2-1. 2 guys say Wake's going to win. One's going to say Carolina's going to win. So that means at least a third of THI is going to be wrong in this podcast, which I'm perfectly fine with. So, because I've been wrong many times in my life, and the sun's come up the next day, and I've survived.
Yeah, I get really upset if my predictions are wrong.
I don't even know what my predictions are. My dad texted me a couple weeks ago and said, "You missed it by 1 point." I said, what was my prediction? Because I forgot. Because I've got a trillion things to do. I just don't remember sometimes. I know in my mind how I think a game should go. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I think more about how it should go than how I think it will go. So, and I really need to cut, because I have to cover the team from that perspective.
Yeah.
And
but like you said, Wake Forest is going to, I've been to Wake Forest several times, and basically almost 50%, maybe even more than 50% have been Carolina Blue in the Joel. And I don't think it's going to be that this year, since Wake is having a good season. And, like Brandon said earlier in the podcast, it doesn't matter what Carolina's record is. Wake Forest wants to beat UNC. And
that's a good point. Let me throw this out there too before people turn us off. The best road atmosphere they played in this year was at Charleston. And Brandon was at that game, because in the ACC games, they went to Georgia Tech at the time that final exams were starting, and the student section was, I guess it was close to full, but that wasn't a great Georgia Tech app. That wasn't Thriller Dome stuff, okay? And then their next road game in the league is at Boston College. And you could have thrown a grenade in the stands, blindfolded, thrown a grenade in the stands. It could have gone off and not hurt anybody. Now, people eventually came in. They had about 6,000 there, and about 4,500 were Carolina fans. Then they go to Notre Dame, and there was still a strong Carolina contingent there, but there were no students because Notre Dame hadn't started school yet. Notre Dame had announced a couple of days beforehand they weren't selling concessions, and you had to have show your vaccination card in order to get in. So the crowd was about 5,500. So I don't think the crowd was a factor. Then they go to Miami, and Miami had just started the semester Monday, but it's online right now. And there weren't a whole lot of people in the building because you had to have the vax card and everything else. But also there'd been a COVID outbreak in student housing. So my understanding is they were testing students that wanted to come in there on the spot for COVID, whether they were going to allow them in the building or not. That's what I was told by a student reporter from Miami. And the crowd actually picked up there as the game went on. But it wasn't a raucous atmosphere. they're going to deal with a much more raucous atmosphere, I think, on Saturday night. And back in the day, when I used to cover the Chris Paul teams, that was an amazing place. That was a great atmosphere. It's not going to be like that Saturday because it's going to take a while for Wake to build back up to that. But I think it's going to be better than what Carolina's experienced in a while. So that could be a factor. It'll be interesting to see how the Tar Heels handle it. She's Deana King. He's Brandon Peay. I'm AJ. We appreciate you guys stopping by. And if you like this video, go ahead and click like. And if you're not a subscriber, you got to come on over. It's just $8.33 a month. You get a 1-year sub. You get all of Deana's wisdom on our message boards, and so much of her football recruiting stuff is not free. It's premium content. And everybody who loves David Sisk, 99.9% of his stuff is premium content as well. And even some of my stuff is, if you feel like you want to dive into my columns and everything else. So it's a great deal. And we also got some amazing posters. Jimmy Naismith has been kicking some butt on the basketball board with his stat analysis. He's not even a member of our staff, but he's a subscriber doing a great job on the board. So it's just $8.33 a month. I should have plugged it early, but Jacob's great about doing all that stuff. That's why he hosts more podcasts than I do, because that's right up his alley. But anyway, guys, appreciate it. Brandon, nice job, buddy. We'll have to do this again. All right, everybody. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks.